Hello, everybody, and welcome to Payment Asia. Thank you for turning up today. If you were due to come last week and you saved it by avoiding coming out here in a typhoon, you did a good job, and we're happy to have you all here today. If you could just please put your phones onto silent, that would be very helpful for me and the rest of our panelists here. And just a warm reminder that there's going to be refreshments and time for Q&A afterwards, some networking, and I'll ask you guys if you need to ask any questions of the panel. All right, so that moment that we have in front of us, I'd like to, again, thank you all for coming. This is the session that we're focusing on around Hong Kong versus Singapore and the future trends in payments and regulation. With me, I have two esteemed guests here. I'd like to introduce to you guys. First of all, we have Mr. Hugh Chow here. Hugh is the former CEO of Astri and has a very in-depth knowledge of what's the technology background, the scientific view of what's happened over the last 20 years here in Hong Kong. And I would also like to introduce my friend, Mr. Pradeep Mahandagopal. He's a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and he focuses mainly on risk, cybersecurity, and leads the region for those people. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Welcome. Okay, so we've just finished off Hong Kong FinTech Week, and I think we would all agree it was a success. It was great to have lots of physical people around each other at an event like that. I'd noted in the press that I thought it was wonderful to see so many aligned businesses talking around the future of Hong Kong, staying very positive around Hong Kong, and I just felt the energy was really, really good. We also, at the same time, kind of the same time, within 2 days, had the Singapore FinTech Festival. Some people say that was a coincidence. Some people think that was a strategic move. Either way, we've got an opportunity to compare. So, I don't spend the whole time looking side by side or looking over our shoulder, as they say, but I would love to focus on what we saw in Hong Kong, what we thought the best viewpoints were from different companies, from different people, the speakers that were on stage, and get some insights for everybody here. Speaking of people that were on stage, Pradeep, you were there, you spoke. Could you give us an update on what you talked about and also what you thought of the week?
Yeah, sure, and thank you for being here. I mean, I think it was a great week, to be honest, just to see everyone in person, a lot of new faces, a lot of old faces, which was really great. Just in terms of myself, my focus was on RegTech and really just providing an insight in terms of particularly the last 12 to 18 months, the amount of movement that has happened in that space, driving adoption, regulatory focus on RegTech, financial institutions, I guess, investing significantly in that space. Having said that, particularly in the RegTech space, we're really only at the tip of the iceberg in terms of realizing those true benefits. There's still a long way to go, particularly in terms of quantifying the benefits that RegTech can provide, ensuring those benefits are realized across the front to back office. It could be enhanced customer experience, cost optimization, enhanced risk detection mechanisms, front to back office process streamlining and automation. We are really only at the tip of the iceberg in terms of realizing those true benefits. And there's a number of enablers which are required, I guess, across the RegTech ecosystem as a whole to really enable us to achieve those. Things around improving the nature of underlying technology that's being used. I mean, a lot of RegTech solutions now are leveraging automation and analytics, and those types of solutions are not necessarily advanced. So really moving into the machine learning space, for example, which is the next logical step. And also just thinking more broadly in terms of what RegTech solutions can provide. If you look at the market at the moment, most solutions are quite siloed in nature, addressing specific pain points. And sometimes that's a good place to start. But the byproduct of that is any benefits that can be achieved from a piece of RegTech are also inherently siloed and quite limited. So really thinking more broadly in terms of, how can RegTech transform an operating model, result in multidisciplinary teams being built, result in data being used as an asset, not just for risk detection, but also to enhance customer revenue generating opportunities and to really just have that broader piece. So I think that's, that forward-looking engagement is really, really important, and it's representative of where we are at the moment. But I'm pretty positive about it. There's a lot of activity in the market. There's a lot of regulatory focus from the MA on RegTech, which is great, and financial institutions are I guess, investing heavily in that space. So it was positive, but it was good to be out in person, I guess.
Yeah, great. That's great feedback, and being up on stage, getting feedback yourself from people. I'm sure you saw a lot of people, or had a lot of people coming asking you questions that were heavily weighted towards the virtual assets piece. Hugh, there was a big update on day one from Paul Chan around the plan for virtual assets being more open in Hong Kong over the next few months and the regime coming in. What was your take on it? What was your feeling about that? Is it overdue? Where do we stand, my friend, compared to our friends in Singapore?
Sure. Well, it's a loaded question. Well, first of all, I'd like to just add a bit more introduction to myself. Former CEO of Astri, so that's behind me now. Astri was the largest R&D centers funded by the Hong Kong government, so I have to do a bit of commercial for the Hong Kong government. So that's done, that's behind me now. So I'm a partner at Radiant Ventures, kind of back to my root, because before I came back to Hong Kong, I was running 2 small venture funds in Canada. So that's what I'm doing now. I must say that I regret I didn't attend any of the FinTech Week event, because I was tied up with something else. But I did follow the news. When the news first came out and saying that, hey, Hong Kong now, finally, after years of considering whether to take considering whether to take an opinion on whether to regulate virtual assets or not. So that's like a very long way of saying sitting on the fence. Finally, the government's come out and say, hey, we're gonna promote, we're gonna let all these virtual assets to be traded in Hong Kong, the VSP license. And my first reaction was that's great. I wish that happened 5 years ago. But it's better late than never. And then when I first further read into the press release, there were only a few kind of meaningful things. One was about the NFT. The second was about Hong Kong dollar, which has already been announced by the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. And then the third one is about green finance tokenization, I believe. Not the most exciting as far as I'm concerned, but I think it's a great start comparing to what's before. I think the longest time we were looking at the one single OSL kind of Type 7 license and wondering when the second or third is going to come. I think they're going to come sooner now than originally planned. And then the other question that some people would ask me is that, oh, does it mean that now we're going to have a lot more ICOs in Hong Kong and a lot more cryptos in Hong Kong? I don't believe that. I think that that's already behind us. But I do think that because of the loosening up of the regulations, we're going to have a lot more of the existing coins or other virtual assets can be traded in Hong Kong. We do have one of the largest secondary market in the world, being the Hong Kong X, and I hope that this is going to add to Hong Kong's position being one of the world financial center. Now, how is that going to compare to Singapore? That's the question that I hate to answer every single time, because I don't think that Singapore and Hong Kong deserve to be on the same sentence. The more we talk about the other city, the more we're promoting the other city, because Hong Kong, we do have an advantage that the other city doesn't have. I can argue that anything that you could do over there, you can do it here, but here you do have the largest settlement and trade between any currency with the RMB, and we do have the most settlement for any trade with China. So I think that's an advantage that we can have and continue to have, unlike the other cities. So that's kind of my answer to
It's
to your
interesting.
questions.
No, it's great answer, and thanks for the detail on your past as well. You know, it's unique. I think we talked previously about Hugh's journey, and unlike Pradeep and myself, we've moved to Hong Kong over the last 20 years, whereas Hugh actually left Hong Kong and has come back to Hong Kong in this position where he's had an unbelievably unusual and unique insight into how the government works here. So it's brilliant to get your view on that. And the other city it's like talking about an ex-girlfriend or something. So I like the way we can lighten it that way. All right, well, look, another thing that came out of Hong Kong FinTech Week was an emphasis back into grassroots, back into cyberport and development of small businesses, startups. You know, there was another stat that came out that apparently over the last 5 years, we've gone from 180 fintech companies to 800 fintech companies being based in Hong Kong. That's phenomenal. That's exponential. I'm surprised there's 800 fintech. Fintech is so broad, right? So pretty, you know, Price Waterhouse, I know you've got accelerators and plans with small businesses like that. What's your view on the future for Cyberport now if we get more backing into that as a hub for Hong Kong and helping Hong Kong then continue to be a hub for fintech in Asia?
Yeah, I think the role of Cyberport is incredibly important, particularly as an incubator for startups, for small fintech companies, enabling them to connect with users, to connect with regulators, to connect with financial institutions, and really bridging that gap. I think when you look at the ecosystem within Cyberport, it's a lot more diverse now than it was a couple of years ago, which I think is indicative just of the nature of those startups and also what the market is really calling for, which I think is positive. I think as we look forward, I think there's an incredible scope of opportunity, more opportunity for sandbox development and experiments, the use of the GBA and what does that look like in terms of really bringing some of the technology and the startups we have here to the mainland and also vice versa. I think it just represents an incredible opportunity in terms of just the flow of people and expertise. And I think those two go hand in hand because when you look at Cyberport, there's obviously the underlying technical capability, but there's also the people and the skill set. And really that cross-pollination of both across the mainland via the GBA, I think represents an incredible level of opportunity for all parties, actually.
It's amazing. You know, like I say, it's exponential growth, but it's happened whilst you and I have been here. I wonder, Hugh, you know, Cyberport didn't exist, right, when you left, I guess. I don't know when exactly Cyberport was built, but I don't think it was built in 1992 or 1993.
Well, Lee Gardens weren't here, so when I left.
Okay. So what's your view on Cyberport, right? Having come back in 2017, 18, you know, the concept of it, and, you know, do you think it's delivered? And do you think this is going to help make it deliver more in the future?
Well, first of all, disclaimer, Simon, the chairman, and Peter Yang, the CEO, is a very good friend of mine, so I'm not going to say anything negative about Cyberport. In fact, I have nothing negative to say about Cyberport. Great questions. I think Cyberport and Science Park both have a very big role to play to promote innovations in technology overall in Hong Kong, and Cyberport definitely has a stronger bias. I shouldn't say bias. I think that they are more focused on fintech and among other things, and I think that's very well positioned because people always talk about how Hong Kong's kind of lost a little bit of its theme over the last few years. There's always critics out there, but I think on the fundamentals as to why Hong Kong is one of the largest world financial center states. As long as those elements are around, then we have a great future as far as fintech is concerned. And Cyberport, the number I heard actually larger than 800, it's about 1,500 anyhow, but it doesn't matter. I think that of all those, there will be a few that's going to come out really, changing the world in some shape or form. I oftentimes, talk to because I'm in the venture space and I talk to a lot of the startup founders, and I always tell them, before you tell me anything about your technology, before you tell me anything about your differentiations, tell me your market. right? If your market is 7 million people, too small. If your market is, 110 million people in Japan, too small. You have to focus on the world, if not at least half the world, right? I mean, now it looks like that the political agenda, it's getting more and more stronger and stronger. But, if you look at the, Pradeep earlier talked about GBA, and you look at the mainland market, that it's, 1.4 billion people. I think that's how you to decide whether to attack certain market segment. And for Hong Kong, our FinTech, our financial services industry is doing business for the entire world. As I said earlier, half of the exchange between US dollar and RMB goes through Hong Kong. So as long as we can facilitate that in some shape or form, RegTech being one, a lot of payment tech and so on and so forth, that's worth spending your time on, and for investors like myself, worth investing into. And Hong Kong is the place to do those things.
Yeah, and it is unique. I think Cyberport, in my knowledge of the way that it's been developed, is unusual. For the best of my knowledge, I don't think there's a version of Cyberport exactly in Singapore, in other cities around the region. So Hong Kong small businesses do have that as a great base, right, to set up for the future. All right, well, those companies are there to develop money for themselves, but one of the most valuable pieces of information that anybody can hold right now is data. Data is key. Data seems to be the new king or queen of how we do business these days. And another one of the big announcements last week was the CDI, the commercial data interchange. That now being live, what does that bring to the market? What do you think that's unique about that brings Hong Kong again to the vanguard of fintech and small businesses fintech?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first if you want. Yeah. So I think from my perspective, I mean, it's really positive. I mean, when we talk about how can really facilitate financial inclusion, like this is a key enabler for that. I know they're starting off with the SMEs, but even if you put if you kind of look at it from their perspective, suddenly they're able to own their digital footprint. Suddenly they're able to own all those data points that they have on themselves. And then they're in a position to actually use that information to open up doors to financial services, to be able to monetize that data themselves, to be able to control what it looks like from a risk assessment perspective, and then scale that out. And I think that type of opportunity, particularly for SMEs, which have been struggling, not just during COVID, but even pre-COVID, I think if we're all honest, I think that represents a great opportunity for them to grow, and that's healthy for Hong Kong, I think industry-wide. Yeah.
Does it open up any risks, though, from a cybersecurity perspective? When you guys were looking at this from Pricewaterhouse, was it anything you were concerned about? Having access to data is cool, but what if somebody else gets access to that data?
Yeah, so I think as part of that, there are a number of data privacy requirements that are embedded. There is encryption, there is controllability around that. But I think that's just a byproduct, because if you don't have access to data and that type of data, there's so many inherent limitations that are basically going to stunt those growth opportunities. So it's almost as if we need that data, but you're right in terms of you need that framework, that governance to actually control the data, to make sure, and we've had a number of high-profile data leakages, particularly over the last couple of months. So, it's not easy, but you do need to make sure that that type of framework is in place to actually cover or do your best to actually mitigate those types of controls and things like that.
What do you think here? Do you think it's a good thing for the Hong Kong business economy?
Well, interesting. That's why I let Pradeep, kind of go first. When I was at Astri, there was some 4 or 5 years ago. Open data was one of the key initiatives that we were working with Hong Kong MA on, and later on, one of those initiatives became the CDI, which is what you just talked about. I think it's meant to facilitate a more timely, more accurate kind of credit assessment for businesses, especially for SME, and Pradeep rightly pointed out. I think oftentimes in the fintech space, new technology comes out is not necessarily beneficial to the existing players, the largest player. And that's why, MA has sometimes a very kind of difficult battle to fight. They're doing things that's right and that's good for Hong Kong in general, but may not be well received in the industry, especially at the upper echelon. But I do think that CDI is one of those initiatives would actually benefit all the players across, and that's why I believe that it has legs. And I do think that as SME and most of them, what they struggle with the most are usually cash flow, especially the last couple years with COVID and everything else. So I think this is going to help them. It's going to be welcomed by most of the SME owners. And you also spoke about data privacy and data security, and another role I have. I'm actually on the one of the vetting committee for the big data governance, and also chairing my committee is the ex privacy commissioner, and we do look at these things extremely closely. And I do think that CDI for the most part is for commercial data, not individual data. And you can say that I'm not trying to suggest that one is more important than the other, but it's just less so when it comes to personal privacy. And so I think from that standpoint, it's definitely something that I believe that it will benefit the whole industry, and I hope that it's going to take off. In fact, I think when Eddie announced it last year, it was not new. It was last year. I think beginning of last year when they announced it, the industry didn't really pick up on it that much at the time. I did because I followed it and I worked with them on it. But I believe that back then was mostly people's mind was on COVID and when we're going to open up, and finally we do open up now, and everybody is back talking about all these great initiatives they've been around for a while, at least for 18 months. So it's good that people now are paying attention and taking advantage of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely something that's been talked about for a while. And I remember I'm with you, when the news came out around the CDI coming, it didn't make a lot of press, but it seems like when it was announced that it's actually live, this week it was at the forefront. Okay, so let's just take things. We got quite granular there, and it's good. And with the level of people we have here, it's good to get into the details. But I want to bring it more high level, right? So the title of this is around comparing Hong Kong and Singapore, the other city, right? The other city recently made big news, right, by overtaking Hong Kong as Asia's largest financial hub. Why do you think that matters? Do you think that matters? And if so, why does it matter for Hong Kong, or does it matter for a perception of Hong Kong outside? Or maybe I'll go to you first. Here.
Can I go first this time?
Let's
All right,
go.
I'm going to go first this time. I'm just trying to grab the mic this time. Just so that you guys know, before we came out, I came back after 30 years, but these two guys, you came here 18 years ago. Pradeep, you came 8 years ago. And I asked them this question. I go, well, you know what? If you were to make that decision again today, coming to Hong Kong or not, would you? And your answer is, Pradeep?
Yeah, I would. I was actually. I'm very buoyed about Hong Kong.
And the reason is, I think it's important because that spells out why Hong Kong is still the major financial center. I'm not saying a.
No, I think there's a number of underlying factors that go to it. Personally, for me, I think there's a cultural aspect to Hong Kong, which I really enjoy, both from a professional standpoint and also from a personal standpoint. I've got a certain affection here just for a number of different reasons. And then professionally, when I look at the economy and I guess just the growth potential, when people start to look at, I guess, Singapore as a hub to Southeast Asia, which is a fair call. But equally, when you start to look at Hong Kong as a gateway to the mainland via the GBA, I think from my perspective that represents an incredible amount of opportunity, and I am very opportunistic about it. So yeah, I mean, even knowing what's happened the last couple of years, I still would have made the decision to come here. Yeah. I'll put the question to you.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. So I'm playing the moderator now, and you, David?
It's all good. I like. It's good that I don't have to think about questions. I can answer. Look, I'm also very bullish, and for similar reasons. I love it here. My children are born here, and I wouldn't, bring them up their whole lives somewhere I didn't want to be. I think it's a beautiful, vibrant, exciting city. But I do also think that it has this unique status of being not only the gateway but the anchor of China. And I think that Singapore doesn't have that attraction for me. I think Singapore is a great location, has access to lots of countries around it, right? So geographically, it's great. It's close to Indonesia, close to Malaysia, big economies, Thailand, but it's not actually intrinsically linked. And I think our intrinsic linking into China is fundamentally so powerful, that it'll never make us the other city.
Well, I mean, I do owe the official answer. So here it is. We always talk about comparing to the others, right? I mean, I think last year we finally lost our GDP battle to Shenzhen, and we're going, whoa, what are we going to do now? I do think that in any circumstances, we can't really just look at what the other guys do and try to dictate what you're going to do next, because that's called reactive. I do think that as leaders, we need to be taking the lead. We need to be proactive. When you think about, look at the hands that we're dealt and just play them well. And I think my fellow panelists have talked about what are the advantages that we have being in Hong Kong. And obviously we have some disadvantages too, some being why the government's 5 years too slow in rolling out certain policy. I hope that's changing. I think that's I shouldn't say I hope that's changing. I think that is changing. I think the new administrations have definitely shown the determination and the willingness to do better, to do faster. Now, would there ever be enough? Never be enough, because you can always do better tomorrow than today. So I believe that as long as we keep hands on the wheel, eyes on the roll, and we're going to do fine. I think what got us here will continue to carry us through. It doesn't mean that we need to be complacent. We should definitely not be complacent. But just by judging what happened last week, the opening of FinTech Week, and we still have this old 0+3. We're not opening up completely yet, and the vibe and the energies all come back. I think that gives me confidence.
That's great. And, I feel like steps forward, right? We're taking good steps forward. It's not ideal, it's not perfect, and it's not 100% yet, but we're getting close. All right, so we're at the point where I would love to ask anybody in the audience if you have any questions for the panelists. Now's an opportunity, and we have somebody walking around with a microphone that will be handed to you. So if anybody does have a question that they want to ask Pradeep or Hugh, please raise your hand, and we'll pass across to you guys to be the moderator for a second. Nope, no hands. Okay, well then it's back to me, Captain Moderator. All right, so hey, this is a payments company, right? So we've been hosted today by Payments Asia, and I think one of the key questions I wanted to ask you both was, if you are a payments processing business, or even if you're a merchant, right, that is an e-merchant that needs a payment processor, like what's the what do you have access to in Hong Kong that you don't necessarily have access to in the other city? And as a payments company, how difficult is it to get licensing here compared to there? And why would there be a benefit of doing one or the other? Does that make sense, Pradeep, to you?
Yeah, I think it largely comes down to what are those individual companies doing? I mean, what's their strategic plan? Geographically, where do they want to actually start business? Where do they want to expand to? What's the nature of the payments as well? Is it retail, corporate, trade, what jurisdictions are they looking at? I think those are key factors. I think when you look at both, I guess, regulatory regimes, I wouldn't necessarily say one's less stringent than the other, but both are probably on equal playing field from that perspective. So I think the ease at which you could do business and I guess the barriers to entry, they're probably quite similar. I think a lot of payment companies in particular, there is an ease at which you can enter the market. Because you don't need that significant capital injection, you don't need that significant overhead or footprint. You can enter, and there is that kind of inclusiveness, which I think is really positive. I think it just more so comes down to an individual strategic level. Where do they want to be based? Where do they want to facilitate their payments to? And where are their counterparts and their end customers?
That's good. We might come back to that a little bit later on. I have an opinion on what the best action there is. But just on MES, VS, HKMA, do you think one has been more proactive about enabling payments companies? Do you think either, or do you, and Hugh, I'll point to you here, has your experience of working with HKMA been that they're inclusive and open? My experience has been that they're very restrictive, with regards to the amount of licenses. SVF, for example, is only 10, right? And the whole time I've been working in payments, there's only been 9 or 10, So over 10 years, not that many have come out. Now, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? What do you think, Hugh?
Well, I don't know. If you ask MA, I'm not sure they consider SVF a kind of form of payment vehicle. They kind of store, I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for them. And I can compare to the regulators of the other city as well. I'm just going to speak straightly from Hong Kong's perspective. We actually switch gear a little bit. Earlier we talked about virtual assets and all this stuff. Those are more like, more has to do with asset management. Hong Kong being one of the places where you find a lot of the high quality asset managers. But when it comes to payment, regulations or regulatory regime will look at it differently. Payment has more to do with AML, whereas asset management will have to do more with investor protections, right? So I think one of the kind of criteria losing up is the definition of or the requirement of PI when it comes to virtual assets, right? But when it comes to payment, I think that really it doesn't matter where you are. If you talk to your boss, he'll tell you that he has business everywhere. But it's really more about does Hong Kong have one of the more favorable or strictest AML requirement? I think favorable depends on who you're talking about. If you want better protections and more in favor of the regulators as far as tracking money laundering and all these things. I think Hong Kong has done a great job. I can't compare to other places, right? But I do think that when it comes to doing enough of AML but not impeding the flow of capital and the flow of payment, the settlement payment, I think Hong Kong's definitely done a very good job from that standpoint. Now, where that's going to go, I do think that with the new policy that came out on the VSP side, more money is going to come through Hong Kong, and I think that also represents more opportunity if you're in the payment business. I don't think that the AML regulation is going to have big changes in the coming future. One thing that we need to watch is how ECNY or ECNH, if that ever happens, and how that's gonna, or what role does Hong Kong play in that regard? Because that's gonna put Hong Kong at a test again when it comes to AML, and I think that's all I can share with you as far as payments concerned.
Oh, it's fascinating. I wonder, Pradeep, you may have seen this, maybe not. Just give me your personal opinion on it. But when I look at where companies are tending now to set up their headquarters, payments companies, like global payments companies, like of Global Payments and Stripe and whatnot, they seem to be having their headquarters in Singapore and then their satellite offices into China here in Hong Kong. Now, when I came to Hong Kong, it was totally the opposite way around. right? It was, I mean, any big US, UK, Australian-based business would come and have their Asian HQ in Hong Kong, and then Singapore would be one of, you know, a rest of Asia satellite sales office in order to access people in and around ASEAN. Why do you think that's changed? Do you feel like is it just down to language? You know, what do you think are your top reasons for that changing over the last 5 or 6 years?
I mean, I don't know if that actually has changed. I think that there are certainly a number of payment. I'm not sure what his view on it is, but I'm very keen to get your thoughts as well. But I mean, I'm not sure it has changed. I mean, I think there are a number of payment companies which certainly have set up headquarters in Singapore, but equally, I think when you look at the landscape here and the broader industry, there are still a number of significant global players that are headquartered here. Mm-hmm. I think there's also a point on, you know, you could be physically headquartered in a jurisdiction, but where's your trade flow? Yeah. You know, where are your revenue? Where is it actually being generated from? And I think there's just so much trade traffic in and out of Hong Kong, which I think you alluded to as well. So I think that has remained, and to be honest, you know, when I speak with a number of my clients, they've said it's only increased, even throughout COVID. So I think sometimes there's also an optics part of this as well, which we should give consideration to. I think the other point is, you know, when we move up north a bit into Guangdong and Shenzhen, when we look at, you know, the significant presence there of a number of payment companies and what that means for Hong Kong, I think that's also very encouraging, because there is still a natural, I guess, nexus between that trade flow and what that means for Hong Kong. So I'm going to slightly disagree with the question a little bit.
It's good. That's what we're here to do, right? Yeah. Bounce it around. And maybe, you know, I'll ask that question of the audience in a second as well. But Hugh, what's your opinion on it?
Well, I can't say I agree or disagree. What I will say is this, is that, you know, depends on who you talk to. I think there were definitely a number of people who have kind of left Hong Kong and gone to UK, Canada, whatnot, and Singapore was one of those places too. Some of them have come back. And I'll get to why they came back, because I do have some friends that came back and I talked to them. Business-wise, I do think that some businesses have left Hong Kong. From the headquarters standpoint, just because the COVID restrictions is placed on them. Whether they'll come back, only time will tell. I think that you can just tell by how what the vacancy rate is in the central area. I hope they come back. So I think part of that is true. Now, when it comes to why people came back already, first and foremost, tax. We have one of the lowest tax on the planet. So unless you want to pay a lot of money to the Singapore government, you will come back. And I think that there are definitely a lot of subsidies and incentive programs and so on by the other cities' government and so on. But like every subsidies and incentive programs, they're one-off. I mean, fine, you can rent for 5 years. It's going to end. It is not self-sustainable. So again, you know, we do have one of the lowest tax rate, and that's I'm going to keep repeating that until people hear it, right? Also for the same reason why businesses will come back too, I believe. Now, whether Hong Kong will change that, I don't believe that will change in the near future. So that's why I'm bullish.
I love it. No, it's interesting, and you know, tax is a big driver. Right? You know, at the end of the day, making money is saving money is making money, right? So why would you not think that way down? Does anybody in the audience have any additional questions on that point? One in the back. We need one microphone to the gentleman in the red shirt.
I wouldn't call it a question, but an opinion. As somebody who's spent 8 years in both cities, I would certainly say that the payment nexus for Asia is Singapore. Simply looking at the card schemes, they've all chosen Singapore as their headquarters. And if you look at all of the, as Devere was mentioning, the global companies, they tend to pick Singapore first. As an opinion on that, I think it's because of the ease of entry into the culture. You know, certainly when I moved to Hong Kong, one of the biggest barriers was Chinese. And understanding the changing culture. Now I've come to embrace it, I love it, which is why I'm still here, but I think that also plays a big factor which is outside of what we've talked about so far.
Great. That's very well put. What do you think, chaps? Is culture, a big driver if you were, a payments company or any sort of fintech company, looking to choose Hong Kong or Singapore to put 50 people? Has that become a large factor? Like I say, when I moved to Hong Kong in 2004, it wasn't a factor. I didn't speak Cantonese, and I'd not actually been to Hong Kong before. It was, this is where you're going, for tax reasons. Everything was driven by finance back then. But actually, nowadays, there is a bigger emphasis on culture in a business, culture, being able to look after the psychological safety of your staff, and you move somebody from Canada, US, into a country, maybe it seems easier to land them in somewhere where English is the first language.
So let me just share some of my experience again. It's not meant to agree, disagree. I used to run a company myself too. I was very fortunate. I founded a chip company back in 2001 and eventually took it public in 2013. I had 8 R&D centers worldwide. I had about 500 people, 3 in US, 1 in Russia, 1 in Tokyo, 1 in Beijing, 1 in Hong Kong as well, none in Singapore. And there's a reason for that, because I went to where my customers were. I went to where I find the best talent, right? So these are 2 things, and obviously the third was tax. Now, what I don't want to get into, and I encourage everybody, here, as well as whoever is online, we don't need to put the other one down to lift ourselves up. We have enough going for us. There are always enough money to be made. We just need to focus on what we do and what we do best. I do think that for the last few years, Hong Kong has taken half a step back because of some unexpected circumstances. No one predicted the pandemic, and we dealt with it the best way we could. We can criticize our government administration all we want. I think we can say the same to every administration on this planet anyway. We can always pick something that they didn't do right. But here's a restart. I do believe that as long as, and I mentioned earlier, as long as all the ingredients that we have here in Hong Kong stays the same, there's no reason why we don't continue to be one of the world-leading financial center, including payment. If another city is beating us to it, we need to learn from them and take them head on.
Yeah, take them head on, or at the same time, showcase that you don't have to have all your eggs in one basket or the other, right? It's a great point there, Hugh, around, this competitive tension between cities is a bit ridiculous, honestly, because they're very different places, right? It's like comparing Seoul to Tokyo or Paris to London. It's like, they're really different culturally and structurally, regulatory-wise, right? So we don't have to always do one or the other. Pradeep, you have a question?
I was just going to add on, I think it's also important just to mention that most of these payment companies that are either headquartered here or headquartered in Singapore, they've got operations in the other jurisdiction, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're not choosing one or the other, and there's a reason why, because, they're both profitable, they're both different, and they serve as markets different purposes for those companies. So I think, to Hugh's point in terms of not choosing, I think that's important because, these payment companies aren't choosing either, right?
And you've made a great point a couple of times. Like, where are you trading? If you have the ability to trade up in North Asia and in Asia and in Southeast Asia, then have a foot in both camps, maximize what's available to you in both places. And what's going to happen? Each place will get better. Each place will learn from the other. Each place's regime will make changes to keep up, right? And I feel with risk in mind as well, it'll keep companies safer, but also give them optionality to broaden their scope of where they could work and how they could work. So I agree. It doesn't always have to be a competition. It can sometimes just be a friendly rivalry, and that is what drives businesses and countries and companies that are in those countries to get better. So it's been fantastic. We've got a 5-minute roundup, and if we don't have any more questions for the for the panel from the audience, I might just drop a teaser in and just say, so if you're going to guess which of the two of our friendly rivals is going to become, the number 3 in the big news was that Singapore overtook Hong Kong in the financial index. Do you think it's going to be Hong Kong or Singapore number 3 place in 5 years' time?
Why do we have to compete for the
Come
third
on,
spot?
because it's fun.
The third spot? Why do we
Third-
compete for the
I was
third
thinking
spot?
number one.
Okay, at least third. At least third.
It's who's one and who's second.
Yeah. No, it doesn't matter. And I think, to my point, I feel like the fact that we're talking about having 2 Asian cities in the top 4 there is beautiful, and it's great for this whole region. So thank you very much to the panelists. You were wonderful. Thank you to the audience, and thank you to everybody online. We're going to have an hour's worth of networking. I'm sure there'll be some good questions coming everybody's way at the back of this. But and thank you for participating at the very end of Hong Kong FinTech Week as part of the Payment Asia sessions. All the best.